In this exciting episode, we learn there's money in the briefcase, but woe be to the impressionable woman who has to deliver said cash-filled briefcase, especially when the briefcase ends up holding newspaper clippings. Lost already? No shame here. We'll work it out together in Perry Mason Season 4, Episode 4, The Case of the Singular Double. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose? Pretty simple. Provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel, if the episode was an adaptation. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and revel in a Perry proverb, a pearl of wisdom from the man himself. Finally, we head to the water cooler where, just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library! Each time we visit the law library, we discuss a legal conundrum from Perry's case that helps us set future legal precedents. In this episode's trip to the law library, we investigate the details of preliminary hearings. We can tell that Assistant District Attorney Cutter, a Hamilton Burger stand-in, is new to the whole Perry in court experience. ADA Cutter wants to put on his witnesses, have the judge bind the defendant over for a jury trial ASAP, and then get home while his lunch is still warm. Perry pushes the brakes on all that.
Since we've already established our case, we dismiss Lieutenant Tragg from the stand, move the court to bind the defendant over for jury trial. If the court please, the prosecution cannot rest its case until I've cross-examined this witness. When the prosecution does rest its case, I'll decide whether the defense cares to put on any evidence. And only then can the question be presented to the court as to whether the defendant is to be bound over.
The judge concurs.
That certainly summarizes the law in this case, Mr. Mason.
Is this legally accurate? As far as I can tell, yes. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Singular Double. Lucy Stevens carries a briefcase as she comes out of the Lockheed Air Terminal in Hollywood. She looks at a scrap of paper, sees a security cop in the parking lot, and then nervously ditches the briefcase in the passenger seat of a car. While a mysterious woman looks on, Stevens, who looks like she's about to be sick, bustles as fast as her high heels will take her to a phone booth where she calls political fixer Hugo Burnett. Hugo's happy. Lucy's not.
We went over this before, Lucy. You can't quit.
Please, Mr. Burnett, please.
There's no way you can quit. Not now.
There's a way you haven't thought of. I can't go on living like this.
Meanwhile, the mysterious woman turns out to be Marjorie Ralston, a secretary for another political player, one Whitney Locke. Whitney Locke's not happy with what the briefcase holds within its locks. We can see that it contains newspaper, not cash. Whitney Locke's wife isn't happy with him. She suspects hanky-panky with Marjorie Ralston.
Who is Hugo Burnett, Whitney?
Someone I know, Catherine.
Business
Yes?
and private?
This is very important and very delicate, Catherine. I don't tell you all my business because it would take hours, and you're a worrier.
There may come a time when you might regret not taking me into your confidence, Whitney. Not only on business matters, but other things, too.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that the cool and efficient Miss Ralston doesn't fool me for a second. She's in love with you.
When Locke gets Hugo Burnett on the phone, they talk about the mix-up, and we get that Burnett is a middleman, joining Whitney Locke with one John Ruskin. No, not the influential 19th century English art critic, writer, and social thinker. Just a real estate mogul of some kind, you know. Next, we see a handwritten letter from Lucy Stevens to Carol with a check for over $3,000. That's probably over 10 times that in today's cash, the equivalent of $30,000 worth of buying power. It looks like a suicide note. But Lucy's still alive, working with some hair dye and letting her phone ring. Next thing we know, she's driving her car out to the pier, getting out her glockenspiel, and sending the car into the water while she plays a plaintive melody. Next thing we know, Carol Morgan, aka Lucy Stevens with a dye job, is in Perry's office. Oh, suicide, hair dyed by her own hands joke was just sitting there for me, and I passed it up. She asks Perry for help in finding her missing cousin Lucy Stevens, and Perry agrees. But once she leaves, Perry expresses skepticism.
It must be something of a shock to
Della.
receive a letter from a cousin who says she's going to commit suicide.
So much of a shock she waited 48 hours before coming to town to investigate?
Down at the beach, the authorities get the car out of the drink, but much to Lucy/Carol's chagrin, there's a body in there. Uh-oh. While Carol Morgan, aka Lucy Stevens, and Hugo Burnett identify the body as that of Lucy Stevens, they both know it isn't so, and Perry calls Lucy on it.
You know, my investigator tells me there is no Miss Carol Morgan, not in San Francisco. Now, if you want me to continue as your attorney, you'd better start telling me the truth, all of it. Because if you're hiding something from the police, they're going to find it out.
Next, Perry pays a visit to Hugo Burnett's just as Mr. Ruskin is leaving, and we get some helpful exposition on just who this Mr. Ruskin is.
How do you know John Ruskin?
He spreads his picture in the real estate sections of the newspapers. Ruskin's Rustic Village.
While Perry's out, he makes time to pay a call on Whitney Locke, and that starts the discovery of the true murder victim, Marjorie Ralston, the Locke secretary. Perry also identifies the motive for murder.
The way I see it, Della, the $60,000 is the link in the murder chain. Now get hold of Paul immediately.
Well, Southern Playboy ADA Cutter takes Lucy to a preliminary hearing and tries to mount up evidence against her.
I protest all the fishing lines thrown from Mr. Mason's expeditionary boat. It's clear that counsel, in lieu of a proper defense, is trying to make everybody suspect. It doesn't change the facts of the case.
Who are our suspects? Mr. and Mrs. Locke? Nope. Mrs. Locke disposes of that. What about Hugo Burnett? Nope. That leaves one man, Johnny Ruskin. This is a doozy of a confession speech, too.
Did I tell her about the $60,000? Yes. And did she double-cross me by stealing the money? Yes. And did I follow the sequence of events you set forth? Yes. And if you want to know why I hired a private detective, it was to nail Whitney Locke with the cash. I wasn't aiming to buy his favors. I just wanted to catch him taking the bribe he'd forced me to make. I just don't like that kind of pressure. Marjorie, unfortunately, not only took the money, but she tried to keep it by threatening me with exposure.
The scene back at Perry's office reveals Paul's theory that ADA Cutter may not have learned the appropriate lesson from the way the trial went down.
Why, Perry has Assistant District Attorney Cutter believing he did all of Perry's work when he got Mrs. Locke to eliminate everybody from suspicion except John Ruskin.
That's right. He does believe he did it all. Did he, Perry?
It's telling we never see ADA Cutter again. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A poll is a subject worth investigating more. Adela is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred in the episode. And finally, a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our poll for this episode involves the legality of the campaign donation given by Johnny Ruskin to Whitney Locke.
You insist, then, that the $60,000 campaign contribution was legitimate and not a bribe?
Certainly.
Then why all the elaborate precautions to ensure secrecy? Why all the surreptitiousness, all the furtiveness? Or do you customarily receive your campaign contributions in that manner, Mr. Locke?
Obviously, the pay-to-play nature of the money, what it was designed to do, is legally verboten. You can't buy political favor like that. However, what strikes me about the episode is that no one says, you can't give $60,000 like this. They just know, that is, Whitney Locke just knows, that if it gets out to the public that he got $60,000 in a briefcase, it would appear that bribery was happening. So, our poll prompt: what would campaign finance laws have looked like in 1960? Was there any amount that was too high? The method or manner of donating is up for grabs here. Sleuths, let me know what you find. Our Della for this episode concerns none other than Connie Hines, aka Lucy Stevens, aka Carol Morgan.
I'll tell you the truth. Everything I know about it. I'm Lucy Stevens.
Here's 10 about Connie. Connie was born March 24th, 1931 in Massachusetts, one of 4 children in a family with strong acting roots. Number 2, she began her acting career as a child. She participated in her father's stock company plays. In high school, she was her class secretary. She dated the football team captain, an all-American girl. Number 3, following her father's death, she married an insurance agent and moved to Jacksonville, Florida. She worked there as a model and a radio and stage actress. Number 4, she got divorced. She traveled to New York City for more acting training with Helen Hayes Equity Group and then moved to Hollywood. She started her career in Hollywood with a role on the syndicated television series Whirlybirds after making a game show appearance on the program Dotto.
On the show that turns dots into pictures and pictures into dollars. Dotto.
Here's a paragraph about that experience. Among the contestants playing in prime time on Dotto was Connie Hines, who had come to Frank Cooper Productions for a job interview seeking to be a receptionist. They put her on Dotto instead, and she won $1,400 before being defeated as punishment for wearing a tacky orchid on one show. It clashed with the image the producers wanted her to project. Hines was a winner in another way. Taken by her beauty and personality, representatives from Columbia Pictures offered her a chance to build an acting career. Number 5, Hines' first film role was in the 1960 film Thunder in Carolina. That same year, she appeared in episodes of Sea Hunt and M Squad. Of course, number 6, in 1960, Hines guest starred in Perry Mason. She also guest starred in the CBS Western series Johnny Ringo. Number 7, she auditioned for and secured the role of Carol Post, the wife of Wilberpost in the popular sitcom Mr. Ed. This, of course, is her most recognized work.
Everything George Burns said about her is quite true. Gentlemen, Miss Connie Hines.
How do you do? Wilbur, you're home early.
She gets into character a lot quicker than I do.
Number 8, after the end of Mr. Ed in 1966, Hines made guest appearances in other TV shows, Bonanza, The Mod Squad, and then retired from acting in 71. She married producer and entertainment attorney Lee Savin in 1970 and was married to him until his death in the 90s. Savin worked for Desilu Productions, Paramount, Fox, and Warner Brothers Studios. Number 9, in the 90s, Hines reunited with Mr. Ed co-star Alan Young to perform in the two-person play Love Letters. And number 10, Connie Hines passed away due to heart problems on December 18th, 2009, in her Beverly Hills home. Our Perry for this episode concerns our intrepid hero's reputation, which Whitney Locke gives to us in this scene.
I've heard about your reputation for razzle-dazzle and tightrope walking, Mason. Don't try it on me. As a man in the public eye, I'm jealous of my reputation.
Intimidation? Razzle-dazzle? Tightrope walking? Huh. Our theme for this episode is doubling. Let's count them. There's Lucy and Carol, the in-trouble cousins. I wonder if a hot dog makes them lose control. There's Lucy and Marjorie, secretaries to the corrupt. Marjorie's the one who goes bad herself, while it's Lucy who gets suspected of going bad. There's Hugo Burnett and Whitney Locke, the corrupt political types, courting respectability to paper over their corruption. There's Paul Drake and the John Ruskin hired PI, both clue gatherers, but it's Paul who's the keeper. There's Marjorie and Della, lots of secretaries in this show, and of course Perry and ADA Cutter, attorneys at law. Guess who wins? It's our intrepid trio at the episode's end, of course. They're the singular ones. Look at them sitting side by side. Now, let's hear a Perry proverb. Our Perry proverb for this episode is Perry's last line in court. We've given you John Ruskin's stirring confession. He ends by revealing his paranoid personality. Perry's response to Ruskin's accusation is an absolute keeper.
All that theorizing with Locke. You were after me all the time, weren't you, Mason?
I must have been, Mr. Ruskin. I was after the murderer.
This is basically the MO Perry adopts through the entire show. He's just looking for the murderer, folks. It only took us 4 seasons to have the show's scriptwriters articulate it. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand. Go on, Paul.
Each time we visit the water cooler, we give you deleted scenes, humorous outtakes that didn't quite make the final cut. Here are 3 from the case of the singular double. Number 1, a cut scene featuring the parking sequence that left the money car so close to the terminal entrance. It's just 30 minutes of the car going round and round the Hollywood parking lot, seeking that key parking spot. Number 2, come on, give us what we really want. A TV or radio ad for John Ruskin's tract housing. Hey, Angelinos, tired of cramped city living? Need some personal space? Say hello to our delightful tract housing. We've got a sunny LA cookie cutter paradise just ready for you to embrace identicality. It's not monotony, it's unity. Tract housing, where every home's the same, but better. And then number 3, let's thank the Lord above. We didn't have a scene of just unanswered phone calls in the Lucy Stevens apartment. Our Paul prompts from our last episode, the case of the ill-fated faker, concerned 1. Petty larceny, 2. Breech blockings, and 3. Cuernavaca, Mexico. In our law library precedent, we discussed the dollar amount threshold circa 1960 necessary to make an act of theft grand instead of petty.
Read back those figures, would you please? The money Jim received from Mr. Ames.
Jim took that $10, then down at the club, a cool 100, plus another 100 for breakfast and emergencies.
$210. More than petty larceny.
I want to know what you're talking about.
Well, in California law, getting money under false pretenses comes under the definition of theft.
My dad sent in some articles with this note, quote, although not definitive, these articles support the assertion that the petty larceny limit in 1960 was $250, making Jim's $210 taken under false pretenses petty larceny. Aunt Myra and Dad also did some digging for us on the breech blockings front. They both found a site called Bev Flitchett's Guns, which is a keeper right there. Breech block markings, which were used to identify the murder weapon in the Sacco Vanzetti case, are unique imprints made when a shell forcefully impacts a gun's breech block due to the explosion's high pressure. These identifiable markings, especially clear on soft, uncoated primers, can conclusively link a shell to the firearm it was discharged from. Thanks, Aunt Mai and Dad. As for Cuernavaca, the chosen hotspot for schnooknicks like William J. Campbell, why, you can fly there today from LA for under $500, and you can stay at a top-notch resort for just $200 a day. So for a week that's going to run you close to $2K, hey, if you just knock off your uncle's joint for 80 G's, you ought to be fine for 9 months or so. Now, let's hear some listener letters. Jason Lucky sent us some notes on the case of the ill-fated faker. Number 1, he points out that William J. Campbell, dislikable as ever, even battled Captain Kirk in a Star Trek episode. He points out that Alice shows her commanding presence early on in the episode by sporting some slacks. That's a great point. And then he says Dora Ames's nosy character provides some of the episode's most entertaining moments. Right you are. Thanks, Jason. As always, I'd love to hear from you. You have a comment on the episode, a comment on the pod in general, drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. Next time, we get Whit Bissell and Dabbs Greer in the same episode. In the concluding speech by Greer in court, chef's kiss. It's a keeper. Join us for the case of the lavender lipstick, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat.